everyone. How are you? What a great day. I'm looking in the wrong. There you are. I'm like, where did I've changed things around here and I'm getting familiar with my new surroundings. Anyway, I am glad that you are joining me for this incredible book. We are, I'd say, if not halfway, just about halfway. Um, and we've been just doing our readings on Mondays and Wednesdays for 30 minutes and going through My Father Knew the Secret. I hope you had an amazing weekend. I had a good weekend myself, and I've been looking forward to getting back into this book. And I've been really studying a lot this weekend, all the material that I have at my fingertips, and I've been designing a course that I will be launching here soon, as well as possibly a live. I haven't decided if I'm going to do a 3-day live or just maybe a couple-day live and teach the concepts of a millionaire thinking. So look forward to that as well. Anyway, let's carry on. We are on page 175. It's just a picture of Bob and his friends, which are Lloyd Conrad, Leland Val Vandenwall, and Earl Nightingale. Those were his mentors and people he followed very closely to understand the whole world of personal development. And to start that, he said, choose wisely. Quote, while you don't get to choose your relatives, comma, you can and should. Did you hear me just say comma? Can you tell that I dictate a lot? Pardon me. I'm going to start that again. Quote, while you don't get to choose your relatives, you can and should choose everyone else. Bob Proctor. As mentioned earlier, one of the critical things my dad taught me was to surround myself with people who would cause me to think better, act better, and be better. He would say, Brian, you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. Instead, you want to be surrounded by people that will cause you to stretch. Think about it. Attitudes and behaviors are contagious, and the people you surround yourself with will impact your life in a way that can make it or break it. Around the time I was born, my father met a man named Ray Stanford. Ray was likely the first truly successful person who mentored Dad. He was certainly the first to show interest in helping him become a better man. As their friendship grew and Dad implemented what he was learning from Ray, he noticed that he was attracting other good people into his life. And as this happened, his awareness grew and his life elevated. For the first time ever, my father began deliberately choosing with whom, and how he would spend his time. I remember him telling me how it made him feel to finally understand that he was in control of his life again. It gave him hope. Dad was an action taker. Let me give you an example of what I mean. For years, Dad listened to recordings of Earl Nightingale every day. With his hand, he would hold a portable record player and listen to Lead the Field and The Magic Word while driving in his car. They were some of the first recordings Earl had ever made. He had listened to these recordings so often that he could recite them word for word. Earl was becoming one of Dad's mentors without knowing it. So, after a lot of time spent reprogramming his subconscious mind with Earl's teachings, he decided it was time to meet the man who was so profoundly affecting his life. It was 1971 when Dad made a bold move that changed direction of his developing career. He cold called Earl Nightingale's office in Chicago and asked to speak with him. Earl was not there, but the secretary took his number and said she'd have him return the call. Well, much to his surprise, Earl Nightingale did call him back. When Dad answered the phone, he heard Earl's rich, deep voice say what he'd heard him say thousands of times at the start of all his recordings. Hello, this is Earl Nightingale. He said that hearing Earl's voice on the other end of the phone sent shockwaves through his body and that he nearly dropped the phone. Without hesitation, Dad asked Earl to meet with him, and he said he would happily fly to Chicago to make it happen. Earl replied that he was busy and that he would arrange for someone in his office to sit down and meet with him. This was not the answer my father was looking for, and in no uncertain terms he repeated his request and made it clear that the person he wanted to sit down with was Earl Nightingale. And being the natural born salesperson that my father was, he provided Earl with options of days and times that he could come to Chicago. Earl chuckled and agreed, and just like that, Dad was sitting across from Earl Nightingale at his desk in his Chicago office. Before I knew it, the family was moving to Chicago. That is how quickly and how confidently Bob Proctor took action. Earl Nightingale and Lloyd Conrad became a part of Dad's circle of influence. I was just a young boy when we made that move to Chicago, so he could work with these two giants in the personal development industry. As my father would have been the first to say, they didn't just start a company, they started the entire industry. The experience Dad gained working with Earl and Lloyd was the springboard for eventually going out on his own. Dad spoke of the endless flow of ideas he would have while working at Nightingale Conrad, and how, with his office right next to Earl's, he always knew what book Earl was reading, and he would quickly go out and get a copy of it for himself. I specifically have fond childhood memories of Lloyd Conrad and being at his house for dinners. He felt like a grandfather to me. It was Lloyd who really taught my father the power of marketing and salesmanship. Dad had another very close friend whom he spent a lot of time with in Chicago. His name was Jerry. It was during this time that the idea of teaching to large groups began to form in Dad's mind. In fact, it was in our home at Maplewood Lane in Glenview, Illinois, while working at Nightingale Conrad, that he wrote out his goal on a gold card of becoming a speaker and becoming a business that operated all over the world. Page 179. One day while Dad was driving to work, he had an inspired idea to record himself speaking as if he were teaching to an audience. This idea excited him and terrified him at the same time. He got started right away making a demo recording. I remember him telling me that he had put a lot of time and effort into making that recording, working and reworking the presentation to get it just right. He asked Jerry if he would be willing to listen to it. This was a big step, but he was proud of what he had recorded. The day Dad shared his recording with his friend was a turning point. The two of them sat on the couch in the living room as Dad played the recording. Not a word was said, but the look that his friend gave him said it all. He was embarrassed for my father. I often think of the courage it took in those early days to keep going. It would have been easy for him at that moment of shame and embarrassment to say, well, it was just an idea, and move on. And he did for about 2 hours. But then he realized what he was doing. He was letting someone else steal his dream simply by the embarrassment and shame he felt after sharing it. What Dad had discovered quickly was that his friend did not support or encourage him. In fact, with a simple look, he knocked him down. After that, Dad slowly put distance between them, and they did not spend as much time together. Changing the people we spend time with can be difficult because our inner circle often includes close friends or family whom we've known our entire lives, and they are not necessarily comfortable with us changing. I'll just pause there. I know this firsthand. I don't like to say I lost friends. I don't lose them. I know where they are if I want to go and hang out with them. But I have chose to distance myself from certain individuals because they think I'm too good now. And then that's their perception. That's okay. And I'm not. I'm no better than they are. I've just chose to follow this path of learning and personal development, and it's amazing. And my growth and confidence and all these things, it causes them discomfort. It causes them to feel uneasy because um, I'm just confident in myself, and that didn't used to be me. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing to note. You'll acquire and you'll create new circles of friends, those who understand you and appreciate you and lift you up. Those are the people you're looking for. Back to the book. I admire that my father was unwilling to allow anyone, even someone close, to deter him from his goal. This is an excellent example of why we need to choose wisely who will be in our inner circle. We need to have people that not only support our dream, but people who will enhance it by encouraging us and challenging us. We also need to be that person for others. Outgrowing the people around us is natural when we're on a path of personal development. You don't need to cut them out of your life altogether. You just don't visit as often and you don't spend as long. I always laughed when would hear Dad say, I don't want to spend a lot of time with anybody who's not goal orientated because I might catch what they've got. Page 181. Consider, are you surrounding yourself with the right people? If you want a preview of your future, look around at the people you're hanging out with. We will become what we think about most of the time, and what we think about is greatly determined by who we spend the most time with. You ever thought that? Choose wisely. As you grow, that may mean changing friends and colleagues. It's okay. It's part of life. Just trust that hard work and not getting involved with wrong thinking will keep you on track for reaching your goals. By listening to by Begin by listing 5 people you think could help you take control and growth. Take your growth to a new level. These can be people you already know, you want to know. They can be people you may never know, but you can still learn from them. Success will come from keeping your sights on goals and always working to be better. Great picture. Picture of, there we go. Bob. That's an awesome picture. A real pro. Quote, you don't become a real pro by doing certain things. You become a real pro by doing things in a certain way. Quote, Bob Proctor. I recently watched a recording of my father hosting the first segment of a masterclass program he created during the pandemic. Whenever I watch Dad teach online, it helps me to see him the way others see him. In this segment, he was discovering new content. I know he worked hard to prepare for that new program. When Dad and I would talk in the mornings, he would often say, if I could just reach more people with this information. This was when I knew he was working and reworking his delivery, always striving to say things in a way that more people would understand. Dad built his presentations with this quote by Albert Einstein as his guiding principle. Quote, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. I wonder if people realize how much time my father would put into creating every class and seminar. It would be impossible to know unless you spoke to him daily, like I did. You wouldn't have otherwise known because my father was such a pro that he made it look easy. Dad worked on every presentation as if it was his first. He was constantly tweaking and working on his delivery and visual tools, always striving to impact more people. For example, I remember a slide he had created on vibration. He had found a way to layer the slides to show how vibration moves from one level to another. He was so excited about this, and I laugh when I think about how many times he showed me that slide. You see, the truth is Bob Proctor never winged it. He would work on a presentation right up to the last minute, always refining. Often when he'd send me PowerPoints, he was really excited about it. I would think, these look like the ones you sent me yesterday. But for Dad, Creating his PowerPoints was a part of his preparation. He was building a roadmap for the client to follow, and every adjustment had the potential to change another life. Near the end of his life, when things were more challenging for him, I would suggest he use material from previous broadcasts instead of creating an entirely new presentation. He would look at me like I was speaking a language he didn't understand. Dad would never let other people help him with his presentations, and specifically his PowerPoint slides. I guess those slides were a lot like the chalkboard in the early days. I know Gina tried many times to offer suggestions, and after every event or online class, we would receive emails from people offering assistance to brand Dad's slides to make them look more current. But in all honesty, he didn't care about that. He didn't care if there were different colors or inconsistent fonts. Instead, he created by intuition, and he built each slide in a manner that he would best illustrate the concept he was teaching. Corey would sometimes keep a list of misspelled words she spotted during the presentation, and he would simply laugh when we showed him. Thankfully, Gina would find a way to sneak in the corrections. This is an example of what I meant when I said my dad was always a pro, regardless. He was always prepared. He always gave his best, even when there was an easier way by receiving help. He needed the creative process. He knew that was how he would present his best self. It did not matter to him how he felt or what was happening around him. He made sure he was giving it his all, and communicating his message was his priority. My father would share the following story whenever he was teaching to a group of speakers or life coaches so they could gain perspective and feel better about what they were building for themselves. It was the early 1970s, and Dad was working to make a name on his own. Guiding him was a clear image of himself, speaking from and commanding the stage with large audiences that were willing and ready to receive his presentation. Dad and David Nightingale, Earl's son, had gone all out and rented an expensive theater in Chicago. It was beautiful, with rows of auditorium seating, rich wood, and an elevated stage at the front. It was just as he had imagined. He had a few thousand seats, and when he did the on-site visit, he knew this was the perfect place to launch his speaking career. To fill the theater, he needed a good marketing strategy. With the help of a friend, he created a brochure to use as a direct mailing piece. In those days, you could pay for mailing addresses, and he decided to send 20,000 brochures to homes and businesses in the nearby area. His biggest concern was that he would need more room for everyone and when they showed up. He was more than ready the day of the event. He had practiced his presentation many, many times and felt confident, excited, and nervous at the same time. To help with the crowd flow, he had hired a few people to help direct people to their seats. Dad and David were behind the curtain when the doors opened to allow the crowd in. And then as the start was nearing, David would peek through the curtain, and my dad would anxiously ask, "How many are there? How many?" When the time arrived for the presentation to begin, Dad walked confidently onto the stage. 6 people had shown up. What made it worse was that those 6 people were scattered throughout that large auditorium. Now, what he did next was a testament to his dedication to his dream. Dad commanded the stage and taught as if the theater was packed. He gave the audience of 6 everything he had. He was a pro, regardless. That is always how I've known him to operate, 100% full out. And that first theater experience was a real test of character that he would draw upon whenever he faced similar situations throughout his life. He would always show up. There were many times throughout his career when quitting would have been so easy, but he had eliminated it as an option. Consider, how do you show up in life? How you show up for one thing is how you show up for everything. A lesson I learned from my father is that instead of trying to label everything as good or bad, Accept it as just is. That way you don't get stuck in the debilitating thinking of why. Accept it and keep moving. An exercise to try. Each morning, write out one thing that you will do differently that day to improve how you show up for yourself and others. Make notes about how you felt and what you noticed around you when you carried out your intention. Progress happens with practice and commitment to that practice. This exercise will raise your self awareness and help you better understand yourself and others. It will empower you. Another awesome picture of Mr. Bob. Great picture. There is always a way. Quote, when you really want something and you couple that with an understanding of your nature, of your spiritual being, and the law that governs you, nothing will stop you. Bob Proctor. It was during my 15th year in the late 1970s that we were in California. Dad decided it would be fun for my siblings and me to be a part of the studio audiences of different shows that were popular at the time. To this day, I don't know how, but he got us into audiences of a game show called The Joker's Wild and a sitcom that was filming its pilot episode. However, the one I remember most was being at Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. He had arranged tickets for us to be in the audience, but when we showed up, they would not let us in because my sister, brother, and I were all under 18 years old. That rejection set my dad in motion. Dad immediately got on the phone and began calling people he knew in the entertainment industry. Finally, he reached a friend who told him the way to get around the rule of no minors in the audience was to sit backstage. This guy made a few phone calls on our behalf, and in no time we were guided to the show's backstage and set up in tall chairs right on the floor in direct view of the set. These were the best seats in the studio. We could see everything up close and personal. It felt so special to be sitting in the backstage. Johnny Carson was not there that night, but there was a special guest host, Flip Wilson. Flip took the time to come over and personally meet us. He was warm and friendly and had the most beautiful smile. I'll never forget what a lovely man he was. We also had the opportunity to meet Ed McMahon. He also took the time to say hello and ask us questions. It was a magical night. Years later, we were reminiscing, and I asked Dad how he got us in to see the show despite their rules. He replied, if you really want something, there is always a way to make it happen. I take on that same attitude. Where there's a will, there's a way. That's my grandmother. She taught me that, and I just keep going. By watching my father, I learned the importance of doing the work to maintain good relationships with people you meet and the people you work with. Dad went out of his way to help the people he knew and to be a good connector. He was always helping friends and others he had yet to meet. As a result, he'd built an extensive network of people worldwide. He knew they could count on him. Through the years, I've watched people meeting my father for the first time, and some were so nervous they couldn't speak. Dad would be open with them and put them at ease with something like, I'm just like you, and you're just like me. We're no different from one another, so you don't need to be nervous around me or anybody else. I remember him saying, if you look at someone like they're better than you, then it's likely that you'll look down on someone you feel is less than you. He was adamant that this was not a good way to live. Instead, we should look at everyone as equal. Yes, some may have more, some less. Never judge another person's journey. Instead, treat everyone as we would treat ourselves. If we do that, we can be comfortable in any setting. A few years back, I was in a meeting with my friend Peggy McCall. She was putting on an event with budding internet entrepreneurs. She had asked if I would be a judge on a panel and listen to people's ideas. Our role was to tell them what we thought and give them guidance, feedback, and encouragement. While sitting with Peggy, brainstorming ideas, she said, why don't we write a book together? My first thought was, I'm not sure I could write a book. We then started to discuss options to accomplish what we wanted. Peggy's excitement got me excited and gave me courage. I borrowed her belief. We looked at it from the point of view that the traditional way of writing a book does not have to be our way. This was a good reminder to avoid getting hung up and limited by how I thought a book was produced. As we continued talking, we came up with the idea of hosting a series of webinars. In these webinars, we would teach the content we wanted in our book. After making the decision, we promptly set dates, sold the webinars, and led the classes. We recorded everything. We then took the money we earned from the webinars and hired a ghostwriter to take the recordings and organize the transcripts of the book. There is always a way. We called the book Darn Easy. Work half as hard, earn twice as much while living the life of your dreams. It's about how to make life easier and get into flow. We had found a way to accomplish the book our way. We even had a large publishing house give us an advance on it because they liked our idea. This was at a time when it was challenging to get advances on books. The entire process was indeed darn easy. New paths open when we are willing to consider new ideas and opportunities. So just like Dad not hearing no and finding a different way for us to attend the show, Peggy and I found a way to make our book work for us. And they did. So they did. Awesome. Okay, we'll wrap up this. I think we can wrap it up. Yeah, I can wrap this up. I'll just shut off my timer in case it goes off. Perfect. So consider. There is always a way to make it happen. Stay open and look for opportunities. Excuse me. If Dad really wanted something, he didn't hear the word no. When feeling challenged with a situation, look at it from a different angle. You may have heard my father say that when he was faced with the challenge, he would write the challenge out on a piece of paper and he would put it in the center of the table. Then he would rotate his position around the table, looking at the challenge from what he thought would be the perspective of his long-gone mentors. Stay open to other ways of thinking. Tune into infinite intelligence. Building your network. When you meet anyone, look for common ground. That common ground can be found easily by taking the focus off yourself and putting it on the person you are talking with. Ask simple questions, and in no time you'll be able to share a story and a smile. You will realize that we are all the same. We are just on different journeys. So I will leave it at that. Fantastic book. This is such a fantastic book. And we are going to start off on page 200 when we come back on Wednesday. Thank you for joining me for this incredible book reading. I really appreciate those who either come back with the recording or maybe you're going to read it. You know what? Maybe come this winter when you got nothing to do, you'll go back through YouTube or the Quantum Connections Incorporated, whatever. You're going to find these little video 30-minute segments and you might just, what do they call it? When they call Netflix binge. You might binge watch me reading this book because there's lots of incredible tidbits in here that will help you and me because we are just on separate journeys. Thank you. We will see you again on Wednesday. Bye.